This is a call-out post to all DPS players. For the love of God, please pick up a pocket Torbjorn. You don't even have to main him, just have him in the back pocket and keep him safe, warm, well-fed, and ready for when you need him. Because I see a shockingly high amount of games that are completely winnable. If only one of our DPS would just swap to Torbjorn. But no, keep playing Genji and going 2-8, buddy. You're doing great. Just keep working on improving yourself and you'll reach your ranked goal in no time. I believe in you, dude. You'll improve and get there. I just know it. Just keep working at getting better, homie. You got this. But just for this one game, could you please just swap to Torb for the sake of my own rank and sanity? So, why is this little Swedish meatball so damn good? Well, we went to an IKEA to ask people what they thought of them to try and put together why. Okay, I'm back from the IKEA. Turns out they had no idea what a Torbjorn was, but they do have some pretty damn good meatballs there, so very worth the trip. But back to the matter at hand, what makes Torbjorn such a strong hero? And a lot of that comes down to Torbjorn being a jack of all trades, master of, well, he's kind of a master of one trade, but Torbjorn just has a lot of different tools that make him a strong pick against almost any enemy team composition. Against snipers, he has his primary fire, which deals a decent chunk of damage and has no fall off, which is especially brutal when you learn the arc for it and the travel time, so you can use it efficiently at longer distances. For mid-range heroes, his primary is still a very good option, as the travel time and arc aren't nearly as much of a problem than they are at long distance. For tanks and close-range heroes, he has his secondary fire, which deals a massive amount of damage up close. Lastly, and most importantly, we have his turret. Incredibly good against flankers and other hard-to-hit characters. Honestly, this is the one area that I think Torbjorn has complete mastery over as being one of the best flanker counters in the game. He is just that good at this one particular thing. While in other areas there are other heroes that are better in that one aspect, Torbjorn is a hero that has a lot of tools that make him decent in all of those different aspects. Long range, close range, mid range, flankers, all at the same time. Honestly, the only matchup that I think he really struggles against is flying heroes. But even then, a lot of these matchups are enhanced even further by the sheer bulk of Toblerone. He may be a short little boy, but he's also really damn girthy. With 200 base health and an additional 50 armor on top of that, he can basically always be a threat against heroes he may not be super great against just because he takes so much longer to kill him. Gives him more time to deal his damage to you. So to put it bluntly, yeah, Tondle Dondle is basically God and you should be picking him more often. So to help with that, we'll talk about all of his abilities and how best to use them. And even if you fucking hate the tiny, little, feeble, microscopic little dwarf man and his stupid child, this info can still be used for evil in formulating your game plan when playing against a trombone. So it's useful for everyone. But before then, please subscribe and leave a like, it really helps the channel a lot, and I know that a lot of y'all are interested in Overwatch. Why else would you click on this? And have seen these videos from me before, so like, why not just do it, bro? Like, the algorithm will probably bring you back here at some point anyway, so just come on, dude. Do it, homie. Please. So moving on to more of the guide part of the video, Tron Bond's primary fire, the trusty Cheeto Slinger, is just absolutely incredible. 70 damage, no fall off distance. The only negative thing about it that you could say is that you need to learn the projectile arc and travel time to be able to land consistent criticals at range. But aside from that, it's absolutely incredible at both medium and long ranges. Trob may be one of the best counters in the game to a good Widowmaker, especially if you don't play any sniper heroes yourself. The increased health that he gets from using Overload makes it so even a fully charged headshot will not kill him. And the increased fire rate lets him use his primary to either spam out the Widowmaker or even just straight up kill her. It's like they said in the hit docu-series Planet Earth, if anyone ever watched that as a child. Cheetos are the natural predator of spiders. Very true. I remember it vividly. Now, let's get into the real interesting stuff. Trojan Horse's secondary fire. It is a close-range shotgun blast, and like other shotgun-style weapons, it has a spread pattern that it is necessary to learn to really maximize the value that you get out of it. Now, for Tarb's spread pattern, it's shaped a little bit like a cute little star, but this star hides a very dark secret. If you remove the outermost pellets because they're too far away to be useful except for in point-blank range, you are left with this shape here. An inverted cross. This is a reference to some unreleased lore where it's revealed that Torbjorn is actually Satan, and that Brigitte is the Antichrist. But I'm not a fan of people leaking stuff, so just please forget that I said anything about that. And this inverted cross is what you're looking to hit people with when using your secondary fire. Because of this, unless you are breathing down someone's throat, you don't want to be aiming for the head. You actually don't even want to be aiming for the chest either. For most ranges you'll find yourself in, you'll actually want to be aiming for right around cock level. It will vary depending on a lot of factors, such as how far away you are, and what the hitbox of the hero you're fighting against look like, but your main goal is for the 5 pellets closest to the center of your reticle to be hitting the body, while the pellet at the very top hits the head. This will deal the maximum amount of damage. Here also a quick example against Soldier 76 in the training range, just to show the difference between aiming at these different locations with Tingle Dingle's secondary fire. So as you can see, aiming at the head was by far the least effective, while going in for the Texas vasectomy was the most effective way to deal damage. It is also worth noting that if you are extremely cracked at hitting consistent criticals in close range with your primary fire, then that can actually be even more effective than Torby's secondary fire at anywhere else but point blank range. But the secondary fire is more consistent, since even if you're off a little bit, you'll still get some damage out of it due to the spread, whereas if you miss your primary fire, then you get absolutely nothing. In addition, your secondary fire does have a fall-off distance of 10 to 20 meters, so basically any distance beyond 10 meters you're going to be better off using your primary anyways, unless a target is literally 10 health or less and you just really need to hit a single pellet in order to finish them off. So next up we're going to talk about Parmesan's ultimate, because I could write a novel that could rival the Bible in length about optimal turret placement in theory, so I'll save that one for last and keep it brief. One common mistake that I see a lot of virgin Torb players make is that when they ult, they blow their load too early, leaving both their partner and, more importantly, their team incredibly disappointed and unsatisfied. So it is very important to know exactly how your ultimate works so that you can get the most out of it. Torbjorn's ultimate replaces his weapon with his claw that fires out projectiles that will spread out into pools of magma when they impact the ground. He has a total of 10 projectiles that he can fire, which are indicated by the charges to the right of his reticle, and his claw form lasts for 5.5 seconds, or until you fire out all of the projectiles. Now, why is this important to know? It's because the amount of time that your pools of lava last isn't determined by a timer that starts when you ult, rather they each last for 10 seconds once the projectile hits the ground. Meaning you can last for much longer if you save some of your load for when the ultimate is about to end, instead of just blowing it all immediately. Because your ultimate does not deal more damage depending on how many pools of lava are overlapping. Whether it's one pool or every single pool stacked on top of each other, the damage is exactly the same. Just as a small side note, the pools of lava do deal increased damage to armor health. So they deal 160 damage per second to regular health and 250 damage per second against armor. So when using Tronald Jump's ult, it's better to spread it and go for coverage, and to save some for a second wind at the end of your ultimate so that it lasts for longer. As a bonus tip, you can even fire a couple of projectiles up into the air at the end of your ultimate to increase the amount of time your ult is on the field to the maximum amount. Since the timer doesn't start until the projectiles hit the ground, you can keep your lava pools up for a very long time if the map has an open ceiling. It all just depends on whether you want to cover a very wide area for a short period of time, or if you want to cover a smaller area for a very long period of time. Your ultimate, your choice. Try to make the right plays, or just do whatever makes you happy. Now, finally, the moment that everyone has been waiting for. It's time for Long John's favorite child to take center stage. The turret. Now, Macaroni's turret was nerfed pretty heavily a couple of seasons ago, but it still remains a very helpful tool due to its auto-aiming capabilities. But a big mistake I still see a lot of younger Bjorns make is that they will spend fights hammering their turret as it takes damage. Now the turret is pretty strong, but it's not nearly as strong as Torbjorn himself is. And if you aren't confident in your aim, well, there's no better time than the present to just stop hammering turret and start firing and trying to improve on that aim. Build up that muscle memory, and just let your turret die when its time comes. You must learn to let things go if you truly love them. Speaking of his hammer, aside from being very useful for CBT, Trob's hammer is also a very useful tool in that, being a melee attack, it allows him to hit through barriers and other defensive abilities, such as Sigma's Grasp and Diva's Defense Matrix, to finish them off. Again, just playing into how Torbjorn has all of these different tools that give him the edge in a lot of different situations if you know how to use them. With the current state of turret being heavily nerfed, my current thoughts of it is that now more than ever, it's much more useful as a distraction than it is as a frontline damage source. What I mean by this is that instead of placing turret somewhere where it will always be able to see the enemy team and deal damage to the enemy team, instead you want to place it tucked behind a corner somewhere where it will only deal damage if the enemy team moves forwards and tries to attack your team. Basically, we're placing turrets somewhere where it's very difficult to destroy easily before a fight starts, so that once the enemy team starts to move in, they will either need to just let the turret hit them from the back for free, or waste time turning around to try and deal with the turret, which will take pressure off of your own team's front line, even if just for a moment. To this end, I wouldn't say there are any particular good spots on any maps you should just place your turret down every time, just because placing it there at the same spot every time will make it very predictable and easier for the enemy team to deal with. You want to just keep thinking of new spots on the fly that the enemy team is not checking, and popping a turret up there before a fight so that it's in a new spot that they don't expect, and as such they won't be able to play around it very easily. So when placing a turret, just consider not just what your turret can see, but also where the enemy team can see your turret from. And if it's in a spot where they could easily take care of it from long range, then maybe pop it somewhere else where it's harder to get rid of, but still covers some part of whatever objective you're defending. So on top of normal turret placement for standard gameplay, there's also two other types of turret placement you may need to consider, and that's using turret just to protect your own team's backline, or using it just to watch a flank route or an off angle. With these types of placement, you're not looking to get value out of turret during a fight, you're just intending for it to serve one specific purpose, either watching a flank angle, where it can alert you to someone taking that angle so that you can deal with them, or protecting your supports against a team that's running flanking heroes like Sombra, Genji, or Tracer. For an example, when defending on Rialto, this flank route here can sometimes be used by the attacking team snipers or any other heroes to catch your team off guard. If the enemy team does have a player that keeps trying to abuse this route, then you can place a turret here just to make it more difficult for them to be able to take this angle, and also just to alert your team to when someone is trying to flank that way. And you can do this for basically any flank route in the game, if you think that protecting that flank route or that off angle will be more valuable to your team than having a turret participate in a fight. Because with turret being nerfed, its damage output is only 44 damage per second. So especially if it's on the front line and it's just going to be shooting into a barrier or the enemy tank, it's basically not going to be doing much at all. So it's very likely there are a lot of situations where having it watch a flank route or just protect your supports will be much better than having it just fire at a tank for a couple of seconds and then get destroyed. The same thing can be said for backline turrets just to protect your supports. If you're losing fights due to a really good flanker going back and harassing your backline, then just swap Torb and you can place a turret way back there with them at an angle where it's very far back and it's protected from the enemy team's front line, but still has sightline over your team's supports and can protect them. Again, using Rialto as another example, defending first point, a good place to put turret could be right here, where if your support line are playing around this area, then the turret will be covering them and protecting them from flankers, while also being very far away from the front of the fight, so it's very unlikely that the enemy team will be able to destroy it, unless it's the flanker themselves having to waste time and resources to get rid of it. Another benefit to placing a more protective turret is that how turret cooldown works is that after you place the turret down, it goes on a small 6-second cooldown, after which you can place down another turret wherever you want, which will remove the first one. However, if your turret either takes damage or deals damage to anyone, then you will have to wait a couple of seconds before you can place a new one. Because of this, there's almost no downside to just having a turret in a far back defensive position, because you can always throw down a new one whenever you want to if it doesn't do anything. And if your backline protective turret does do something, well, then it actually did its job and served its purpose at protecting your backline or watching that flank route. You don't need to commit to a specific spot with Torb turret, so just keep it moving depending on the situation you're in. If you're losing ground, then pop it up somewhere where it's tucked away. It can build itself and then hopefully get some damage in as the enemy team moves in. Or if you don't need any more frontline pressure, place it further back where it can protect your backline or watch a flank route. You can always readjust it and replace it and move it around. And that's probably one of the most annoying turret placement styles to deal with, is when it's always in a different spot and you can never really play around it. So the last thing to discuss about Tumble Jumble's turret is attack Torbjorn. When playing Toss.0 on attack, turret is more difficult to get value out of because you're actively trying to take an objective and take space instead of just setting up a defensive position. This is the one space where you can really get a lot of value from having a far back defensive turret just set up in case the enemy team tries to rush into you or a flanker tries to go and get at your supports. Because if the enemy team doesn't aggress and just hold their ground, then you can just replace turret wherever for free. But honestly, the best way that I found to use turret on attack is just to toss it down behind you as you run in with your team. So whenever your team engages, just toss it down somewhere behind you, then you just press overload and run in front of it towards the enemy team. The enemy team will either have to kill turret, which takes pressure off of you and your team's front line, or they ignore the turret and let it build, which in that case, it'll finish building and then start dealing a bit of damage until they get rid of it. And there is a lot more I could talk about with specific examples of good starting spots for turrets on different maps, but that would make this way too long, and I want this to be more of a quick introductory guide to Torbjorn. So yeah, please, for the love of God, start picking up Torbjorn more, and then also, always remember to say it's Torbin time before you Torb all over your enemies. See ya.